Hey friends, it is Friday, May 1st. Homework today and yesterday are a little bit different. Yesterday's homework was a Google form asking, do you like the homework load? Do you want the homework load amended? Because we're like halfway through the fourth quarter. So we'll try to determine where you're at going forward the rest of the quarter. And the homework for today is having to do with Zoom. Basically, do you like Zoom? Do you want to do more with Zoom? Do you want to do less with Zoom? Do you like what we're doing with Zoom? Are there different times that work better for you? So those two forms are just to get some information and data and make this as smooth as we can going forward. And now we're rolling into Chapter 9. Chapter 9. When Violet opened the enormous door of the reptile room, the reptiles were still there in their cages. The books were still on their shelves, and the morning sun was still streaming through glass walls, but the place simply wasn't the same. Even though Dr. Lucafont had removed Uncle Monty's body, the reptile room was not as inviting as it used to be, and probably never would be. Now, what happens in a certain place can stain your feelings for that location, just as ink can stain a white sheet. You can wash it, and wash it, and wash it, and still never forget what had transpired, a word which here means happened and made everyone sad. I don't want to go in, Klaus said. Uncle Monty died in there. I know we don't want to be here, Violet said, but we have work to do. Work? Klaus asked. What work? Violet gritted her teeth. We have work to do, she said. That Mr. Poe should be doing, but as usual, he is well-intentioned, but of no real help. Klaus and Sonny sighed as she spoke out a sentiment all three siblings had never said, but always felt since Mr. Poe had taken over their affairs. Mr. Poe doesn't believe that Stefano and Count Olaf are the same person, and he believes that Uncle Monty's death was an accident. We have to prove him wrong on both counts. But Stefano doesn't have the tattoo, Klaus pointed out, and Dr. Lucafont found the venom of the Mamba de Mal in Monty's veins. I know, Violet said impatiently. The three of us know the truth, but in order to convince the adults, we have to find evidence and proof of Stefano's plan. If only we'd found evidence and proof earlier, Klaus said glumly, then maybe we could have saved Uncle Monty's life. Well, we'll never know about that, Violet said quietly. She looked around at the reptile room, which Monty had worked on his whole life. But if we put Stefano behind bars for his murder, we'll at least be able to prevent him from harming anyone else. Including us, Klaus pointed out. Including us, Violet agreed. Now, Klaus, find all of Uncle Monty's books that might contain information about the Mamba Namal, and let me know when you find anything. That research could take days, Klaus said, looking at Monty's considerable library. Well, we don't have days, Violet said firmly. We don't even have hours. At 5 o'clock, the Prospero leaves Hazy Harbor, and Stefano is going to do everything he can to make sure we're on that ship. And if we end up alone in Peru with him? All right, Klaus said. Let's get started. Here, you take this book. I'm not taking any book, Violet said. While you're in the library, I'm going up to Stefano's room to see if I can find any clues. Alone? Klaus asked. In his room? It'll be perfectly safe, Violet said, although she knew nothing of the kind. Get cracking with the books, Klaus. Sonny, watch the door and bite anyone who tries to get in. Act right, Sonny said, which probably meant something like, Roger. Violet left, and true to her word, Sonny sat near the door with her teeth bared. Klaus walked to the far end of the room where the library was, carefully avoiding the aisle where the poisonous steaks were kept. He didn't even want to look at the Mamba de Mal or any other deadly reptile. And even though Klaus knew that Uncle Monty's death was the fault of Stefano and not really of the snake, he could not bear to look at the reptile who had put an end to the happy times he and his sisters had enjoyed. Klaus sighed, opened a book, and, as at so many other times when the middle Baudelaire child did not want to think about his circumstances, he began to read. It is now necessary for me to use the rather hackneyed phrase, meanwhile, back at the ranch. The word hackneyed here means used by So many writers that by the time Lemony Snicket uses it, it is a tiresome cliche. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, is a phrase used to link what is going on in one part of the story to what is going on in another part of the story. And it has nothing to do with cows or with horses or with any people who work in rural areas where ranches are, or even with ranch dressing, which is creamy and put on salads. Here the phrase, meanwhile, back at the ranch, refers to what Violet was doing while Klaus and Sonny were in the reptile room. For, as Klaus began his research in Uncle Monty's library and Sonny guarded the door with her sharp teeth, Violet was up to something I am sure will be of interest to you. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Violet went to listen at the kitchen door, trying to catch up what the adults were saying. As I'm sure you know, the key to good eavesdropping is not getting caught, and Violet moved as quietly as she could, trying not to step on any creaky parts of the floor. When she reached the door of the kitchen, she took her hair ribbon out of her pocket and dropped it on the floor, so if anyone opened the door, she could claim that she was kneeling to pick it up rather than to eavesdrop. This was a trick she had learned when she was very small, when she would listen at her parents' bedroom door to hear what they might be planning for her birthday, and, like all good tricks, it still worked. But Mr. Poe, if Stefano rides with me in my car and you drive Dr. Montgomery's Jeep, Dr. Lucafant was saying, then how will you know the way? Well, I see your point, Mr. Poe said, but I don't think Sonny will be willing to sit on Dr. Montgomery's lap if he's dead. Well, we'll have to work it out another way. I've got it, Stefano said. I'll drive the children in Dr. Lucafant's car, and Dr. Lucafant can go with you and Dr. Montgomery in Dr. Montgomery's Jeep. Oh, yet I'm afraid that won't work, Dr. Lucafant said gravely. The city laws won't allow anyone else to drive my car. and we haven't even discussed the issue of the children's luggage, Mr. Poe said. Violet stood up, having heard enough to know that she had enough time to go up to Stefano's room quietly. Violet walked up the staircase and down the hallway towards Stefano's door, where he had sat holding the knife that fearsome night. And when she reached his door, Violet stopped. It was amazing, she thought, how everything having to do with Count Olaf was frightening. He was such a terrible person that merely the sight of his bedroom door could get her heart pounding. Violet found herself half hoping that Stefano would bound up the stairs and stop her, just so she wouldn't have to open the door and go into where he slept. But then Violet thought of her own safety and the safety of her two siblings. If one's safety is threatened, one often finds courage one didn't know one had, and the eldest Baudelaire found she could be brave enough to open the door. Her shoulder still aching from the car collision, Violet turned the brass handle of the door and walked inside. So next week, we're going to find out what Violet finds in Stefano's room. Okay, so homework yesterday. Google Forms. What do you think of your workload? Homework for today. What do you think of Zooming, and what should we do with it going forward? All right, I hope you have a nice weekend. I will smell you later.